All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome once again to another episode from Investing with the Difference. And we are going to again focus on another block producer from EOS world, and that is EOS Nation today. And we will talk about what's going on in EOS Nation, from what their focus areas are. We will first start with a quick introduction. So I think all of you must have heard about EOS Nation. They have been one of the most active block producer in the community. They have created a lot of content for people, keeping everybody educated about what's going on. Even from early days, if you remember when we used to do our videos, even the mainnet launch progress, we used quite a lot of updates from them. And they have been doing a lot of outreach. So if we look at their areas of work, so this is their projects on their website. So they are working on EOS referendum system. They have a community engagement fund. They have built a lot of ambassadors who are bringing EOS forward and educating people in various countries. And of course, they're working on wallets, and they did some test nets before mainnet. So we will bring in Yves from EOS Nation very soon, and so that he can talk about what else EOS Nation has been doing and discuss the things which are in the mind of community and what they think. So without wasting any more time, let's bring on Yves. Hi, Yves. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm very good. Yourself? Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure. I've been watching your videos for quite some time now, so it's really interesting to be on here finally.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. I think EOS Nation has been, I think, one of the first block producer. We started seeing a lot of content, producing information. And so where do you see, how do you see the feeling of all this journey through the mainnet launch? And now that we are 3 months into mainnet, what is the feeling at your end?
It's been crazy to say the least. I mean, we started this journey, EOS Nation, as a Facebook group. Debuted last November, so November 2017. So we're coming on the year mark. And from then to announcing our BP candidacy early in March, leading up to the launch and where we are today, it just feels like it's forever ago at this point. I mean,
yes.
Especially in this space, in crypto in general, 1 week can seem like forever. And when you're as deep as we are, spending 24 hours a day doing this, there's very little sleep going on. Even just events that occur a week ago or 2 weeks ago feel like they've been, that they've happened such a long time ago. So to think back that we created and we started this journey as a block producer candidate in March, I can't even put myself in the same shoes anymore. It's been a very humbling experience. It's been a very gratifying experience. It's been wonderful to be able to be part of this journey with other really, really dedicated and passionate people all around the world. So it's been wonderful.
Oh, that's great. I think that's what I feel as well. Being in EOS world, and if you are day in, day out consuming content and trying to keep up with what's going on, it feels like a long time. But if you think about it, it's only 3 months, and the progress EOS has made in 3 months after the mainnet launch. I think it's also partially because of the hype which was around EOS before the mainnet, and the year-long ICO, which was very long process. I think that made people sit up and notice, and the expectations are very high. So where do you think, are you, as a block producer and as a community member, when you go around, what kind of excitement you're seeing around EOS? Are people happy with the progress, or people are kind of skeptical? So what is your view on the ground when you meet people? Because I see that you travel a lot and you meet a lot of people.
So I would say that it depends which communities I'm interacting with. So if I'm interacting with a community that's already aware of EOS, so let's say we take the people that already know EOS and that are already following EOS, it's interesting to interact with them because their level of knowledge is already so high, and so you're interacting with them at a much deeper level, and I can feel the enthusiasm, but I can also feel the impatience. So in my experience, the people that know the most are the ones that are the most impatient because they know what we've done, but they also take into consideration where we'd like to be. And so there's all these keywords, for example, with inter-blockchain communication is one of them. So people talk about this is what we want, and we're nowhere near that. But if I step it down a notch and I talk to a crowd of people that is knowledgeable of crypto, or blockchain projects in general, but aren't necessarily aware of EOS. Their level of EOS is a little bit lower. So when you introduce topics like inter-blockchain communication, they think it's cool, but they don't have that impatience. Because they haven't been hearing about this day in and day out, but then they hear about EOS. So for them, it's more so about EOS and what EOS is going to be able to solve, or where EOS has its strengths. So if we're talking about transactions per second, if we're talking about, so from the tech point of view, being able to accommodate perhaps for the first time enterprise solutions on a blockchain, for them, that's what's interesting. And that's where a big part of the focus is. Whereas if I'm talking to hardcore EOS enthusiasts, at this point, they already know that. So that doesn't really excite them as much anymore. They want to push the envelope further. And then when I talk to groups of people about blockchain, and they're not aware of blockchain, so they're neophytes in the world of blockchain, and they really don't know, the level of discussion that I can have with them is exciting at a different level, because then it's talking about decentralization, and it's talking about the technology itself and distributed ledger, and how that can start to improve and change lives. And from a business perspective, how that can improve their businesses. So I find it really depends on who I'm talking to. I get excited regardless. And then I think that what I've been able to do over the last little while is really be able to get a better sense of what it is the person on the other end is looking for. And so I adjust my speech in a way, and I adjust the level of discussion that I have based on where the other person is. And that's one of the things that I find I've improved the most, is as I get more self-aware and as I learn more about EOS, I'm able to reach the other person where they are more effectively, to bring them to perhaps where somebody like yourself, who spends a lot of time in EOS, is a little bit quicker. Whereas I think that in the beginning, that was a little bit more difficult, because it was a very idealistic view, without maybe knowing as much of the in-depth knowledge.
Understand. So I think no, that's exciting, because you get to meet so many people, and of course, while we are so absorbed in EOS world, we need to understand that maybe the real users of EOS may be 100,000 people, because I do a maths of like 300,000 accounts, and I'm sure that a lot of them which are multiple accounts by same people. So I'm sure we don't have more than 100,000 people, and then we are talking about an industry or a area like blockchain. It's pretty early days. And so coming to that, I think I will use this as a base for our next level of discussion, because we are very mixed up in all this discussion about governance. We talk about governed blockchain. We talk about why it is important. So while we have even this small community, this, let's say 100,000 people who are really using it, they are in themselves split in terms of how this is heading. There's a lot of debates because I think a lot of people came into EOS because of the legend of Dan Larimer and all the work he has done. And I think the kind of history, we have a successful history of like blockchain projects like Steemate.
That's how I came in. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I'm a huge Dan Larimer fan, so that's what attracted me at first. Yeah, for sure.
So now I think there is kind of a feeling in the community that things are divided with the community. It's expected. I think it's a democracy. We always see some kind of views forming. So what's your view right now, like with what you see as a responsibility as a block producer, first of all, while we will discuss about as a community member and we can do a lot more, and I think you're doing a lot, but as a block producer, because you are the building block of this blockchain, which is running, and we have to build trust beyond this small community. So what do you see as immediate concerns and what you want to bring in as a block producer?
So I guess at the base, just to set the tone, as a block producer, our main role, our primary role, if we only had one role, is to have secure infrastructure, secure, reliable infrastructure that's able to meet the demands and the needs of the blockchain. So regardless of whether or not we choose to bring value, in our case with EOS Nation, a lot of it is through community engagement. But regardless of all of this, our primary job and our only job really is to make sure that we produce secure and reliable infrastructure to be able to produce blocks on the network. Now, where we choose to bring value as EOS Nation is through community engagement. And a lot of it is going out. So we travel, I personally travel quite a bit. And a lot of it is meeting with those different stakeholders within the system. So either they're end users, so token holders, either they're dApp developers, or their venture capitalist funds. So whomever they are in the ecosystem, a big part of what we do is to evangelize and to spread the word of why EOS. So to take it a step back to what we were talking about before, you bring a really good point. When we're talking about that there's potentially, let's say only 100,000 or so actual individuals in this ecosystem, we tend to forget that when you get out of EOS world, the rest of the world really has no idea what's going on right now. And so we seem to, one thing that I try to do as much as possible is take a step back, because it's very easy to get lost in this world where everybody knows what you're talking about and everybody is aware, and we might have some discussions on, you know, method A or method B, especially in governance, right? When we take a step back and we actually I go talk to my grandparents, or I go talk to other people that maybe are not in this all the time. This is still such a fresh world. There's so little information out there. And so what we try to do is really try to get those people in the ecosystem. So there are some block producers that are focusing on dApp development, and we are in a way. I mean, our CTO is participating in hackathons. He just came back from Wyoming, for example, and he's heading out to London at the end of the month. And the latest project that he's contributing in and that he's developing is EOSreceipts.io. So it's one of the little projects that he's been doing. So we're doing stuff at that level. But one of the ways that EOS Nation is really focusing on is getting the vast majority of human beings that are not on the blockchain, or that are not even aware of what the blockchain is, to start to know what the blockchain is, and then to realize why the blockchain is important, how it could impact their lives. So that's where I find EOS Nation brings a lot of value. And we do that through our ambassador program. A big part of it is through our ambassador program. Yes. So you mentioned it earlier. Yeah. We have right now, so it fluctuates because we have ambassador prospects and we have full-fledged ambassadors. And right now we have 12 full-fledged ambassadors. And these people are doing meetups all around the world. And to date, we have 41 events that we've personally hosted, and by the time we actually record this video, it's more, because we have another event I think tonight, and yes, last night. So those numbers are off, but we are doing meetups almost for sure on a weekly basis, and we're ramping up and doing more and more and more, and these events are growing. So the amount of people that were showing up in the very beginning, I remember when I did my first meetup, there's 5 or 6 people that show up. And I remember the first time I went to China, I did a meetup with less than 24-hour notice to the community in Shanghai, and we had almost 300 people show up. And the second meetup that I did, I gave 40-hour advance notice, and we had about 350 people show up. And I've been to meetups in Asia where there's 1,000 people that show up. Like these are massive events. And so I think that when you started, your question was in terms of governance, kind of where we see right now that there's not necessarily a split in the community, but there are differing views. I think that it is very particular to Telegram and English right now. When I'm in China, and even in Korea, the difference is flagrant. There's not as much divide in terms of governance. Most people are on the same page. So it is very much so this microcosm right now in Telegram, in English, in these particular channels. And if we take the governance channel, for example, there's 3,100 people in there right now, maybe 3,200 or something like that. If you look at the amount of people that participate, I don't know, maybe 50 people that participate actively ongoing. When we go to China and when we look at some of these Chinese block producers, for example, EOS Gravity has a community of over 150,000 people. Yes. Whenever they send out messages and whenever they interact with the community, they get massive amounts of feedback back. And that back and forth is very different than it is, I would say, here in the Western realm of Telegram. So as much as, again, it's easy for us in the EOS world to forget that there's a whole bunch of the vast majority of human beings that don't know EOS. It's also very easy, and that's the parallel. It's very easy in governance Telegram channel to see that there's perhaps a divide, but when you take a step back, there really isn't that much of a divide.
Sure. No, I think that makes sense. And to be frank, it's less of a divide. It's more of a lack of alignment and understanding of as a single voice. And I agree with you. So personally, I visited Korea and I met with all the block producers and also talked to a lot of people in the community there. And I realized that there is a big language gap. The people these communities are not interacting with each other. So I think I see a lot of good progress from EOS Nation. I think you yourself have done bridging this divide, and EOS Alliance, I think, is now trying to do the same. So it is great to see those initiatives, and I think this is what was needed. The question still is whether we are coming towards any significant alignments and understanding, because even now, an average token holder who is doing a day job and he's busy, like, he's not going to spend hours and hours every day going through calls, going through EOS Alliance discussions. How do we bring education in a very condensed form? And how do we bring that kind of feedback from people who care, but who cannot make this as their like a 4-hour job a day to go through all the material? So what do you think? How are we progressing in that direction?
Well, I think there are multiple initiatives that are going on to be able to help to reach that goal. One of them is, so I'll start off by saying, for example, EOS Nation has been doing a video series on the worker proposals, and the first worker proposals that have been sent for community feedback. So I think that going through, if you had to go through the worker proposal channel and read through all of the messages that have occurred in the last couple of months to be able to get up to speed to where we are today to understand the proposal, it would take a significant amount of time. And so what we, EOS Nation, are doing for this particular thing is I've been doing videos. They're condensed. They're still an hour long, though, so it's very long. I think where there's a lot of value is what you're doing, Raman, with investing with the difference. So we're seeing more and more these proxies being set up. And so we have people, community members such as yourselves, that are passionate, that are dedicated, and that don't mind having a second full-time job. And you're doing a lot of the work for the end users and the token holders. And so people look up to you, and maybe it's tuning into your videos once every, and you were mentioning earlier that you get some emails when's your next video. I think that by having these proxies and by having people that are respected within the community where the values align with perhaps my values as a token holder, the more choices I have and the more different proxies that I have, and we're seeing a lot of these being set up, I can get to consume the information that I'm looking for to be able to make an educated choice, and or to give my my vote to somebody who I believe will make an educated choice on my behalf. Yeah. And I think that for the long term, we're going to see more and more of this because people simply do not have the time to go through all of the material that currently exists.
Sure. So I think that brings to a very important point. So I think from the proxies, the reason, again, as I said, I've been telling people, like it was again a request from the viewers when they said, "Oh, you're explaining me voting. I don't know. It's very complex. How do I research 30?" And this was I learned the process of setting a proxy after I got the request that please set up a proxy. So, but this is where I think there was a missing part, is about education. Like even after setting up the proxy for a month, after 1 month, I realized that the proxy decay, how it works, that even though I'm voting every week for people, they need to reset the proxy every week.
They do as well.
And it's kind of basic information. Even today, if I go and search, I don't find any documentation of weekly proxy decay. There is no formula. And the only thing which, again, EOS Authority came out with the voting decay tool. And now you can put your account name and you see how much voting has decayed. So I think there is a big gap between, I think, the people who know a lot about EOS, that is the people who are debating what should be done, and the vast majority of people who are just a token holder and they're looking for a very, very condensed information. So I think that's what we try to do at our channel, and I thanks that we are getting recognized. I think this was never planned for us. It just happened organically. But what do you think as a block producer? Like, we talk about what you think is your feeling, what you see as a responsibility for, because you are the kind of ambassador for the whole blockchain. While EOS Nation has ambassadors who are talking further, but as a blockchain, people look up to block producers to create some sort of centralized information base, not like centralized, means it's a very bad word to use in a decentralized economy. But
one area where people could come get information and it would be maybe easier and summarized.
Yes, so I think like EOS Alliance was a very promising thing, and it is still doing a great job. My worry is the feedback I'm getting from the community is it's becoming only for the people who have a lot of time, who can engage. So it's not really delivering on the promise of, like, how do you bring these discussions to a person who doesn't really have a lot of time. So what do you recommend? Like, what is your view as a EOS Nation? How do you bring the community together, and especially around referendums? We talk about referendum system. How do you get people to vote when most of the tokens are stuck in exchanges?
So you bring a very, very important point, and that's a really, really good question that I think there's potentially no single answer to. And I know that's a terrible answer, but I'll explain what I mean. We always have a balance. So in EOS, we really want to focus on decentralization. So you hear about decentralization a lot, and this is not only EOS, crypto and blockchain projects in general. And so with that level of decentralization comes the challenges of, where do I go when I get my information in a reliable fashion, right? And so you get people that attack EOS for being too centralized, but at the same time, we're being attacked internally for being too decentralized, right? And so it's that struggle that I think will never, struggle is not the right word. It's that balance, seeking the balance between an acceptable level of decentralization and centralization. So I think this is what we're going to be juggling possibly forever in this realm. And what we are doing, for example, EOS Nation, so each block producer is communicating with their own particular communities. So in this instance, for education material, we created EOSdocs.io. So we took all the information, all the videos, all the different Denler links, everything that we could possibly find, and we're doing this on an ongoing basis, and we put it in EOSdocs.io. Now people first of all, there's a challenge there because people need to know about EOSdocs.io. So if they don't know about it, well, it's not really useful for them. But even once they do know about it, and you open the link and you start going through the material, it's extremely overwhelming. Again, you go back to that, I don't have 50 hours a week to go through all that material. And so that balance is really tricky. So where we're going, for example, now we have institutions or foundations like the Alliance that are coming in, and even 3 weeks, 4 weeks after inception, we're getting comments like you just said, where it's becoming too time consuming again. It's not as user friendly in the sense of absorbing information. I think it's going to be a continual challenge to bring information to the masses. So on the subject of vote decay, I did an AMA where I dedicated about 30 minutes on the subject. But how many people listened to that AMA? And even if I said it that week, what about the next week when our community grew by 500 people and they weren't aware of it? So I have to figure out a way to keep recycling the information and giving more information out. So we do this by doing videos, by doing articles, by doing our AMA. So we try as much as possible through various social medias to communicate out to people. But you need to then go back every once in a while to resend it out, right?
Yes.
So I think what happens is, as a community, this is not a responsibility of just the block producer. Block producers do their role, and we, as much as possible, create educational material. So right now, two of our co-founders are in a channel dedicated to creating potentially one one area where all the different educational platforms, because there are multiple right now that exist, EOSdocs.io being one of them. There's EOS Bootcamp, for example, from EOS Dublin. So there are a couple of different platforms that currently exist, and try to assemble all of those in one particular area. Is that centralization? Yes and no, because it comes from decentralized areas and you're simply assembling it in a way so that it's easier to consume for the end user. But even at that, people will still have a responsibility in a way to go and seek out information that is useful for them. Sure. So we go back to key players. So it's that continual cycle. As much information as we want to push out, we need key influential players like yourself to then reach it out to other people, to then give us that feedback loop of what's missing, what should we do next? Because we communicate with our communities and we hear what their needs are. You hear different needs. And when we establish this circle of constant communication through multiple communities, and this becomes not just internally, but it becomes with others as well, and then others with themselves. And so you get this big giant web of people talking to each other. Then it gets to a certain point where it's large enough where you say, okay, let's assemble this. And this is kind of what happened with the Alliance. And at some point that's going to work, but it's going to become challenging again, and we might have to assemble other things. And that's the beauty of decentralization, but that's also the challenge that comes with decentralization.
Sure. So I think I get your point. I think, but I definitely believe personally that education or facts need not be decentralized. Decentralization doesn't mean that everything has to be, because when it is about facts, about the rules of the chain, that has to be documented, and the contribution can be decentralized. But I think we do need a place for people to go and see. And I hope, as you said, things will fall in place because there's a lot of effort. I'm glad that I think things are moving ahead. But I believe that there's still a lot of work to be done. So there's
still a lot of work to be done. This chain is 3 months old, right?
Yes.
4 months old, yeah.
Yes, so let's shift gears a bit and let's move on to the ecosystem. And as you said, that you yourself has a branch which is working on dApps, interacting with people in hackathons. So maybe we can keep it short and say that, okay, what is your view on adoption? Like, do you see that more and more dApp developers are coming in when you go and attend these events? What is your view of how fast EOS is getting adoption, and is it meeting your expectation?
I'm a very incredibly impatient person by nature, so it's not coming fast enough for me. However, having said that, the amount of people that are currently interested and currently building on EOS for dApps, in my personal experience, is incredible. We have so many different projects that are currently being built, that are thinking of being built, that this ecosystem for something that is as young as what we are now. So yes, we did have the year-long ICO, but really the chain's only existed since June 10th. So we are really only in our, fourth month, or third, we just finished the third month. Considering all of that, I think we have incredible opportunity. We're already the #1 blockchain sustained by transactions per second volume. Even if you remove, for example, the spam that is being produced, or what people call spam being produced by block Twitter and chain Twitter, we're still by far the most used blockchain. In such a short period of time, that's incredibly significant. Considering at the same time we're in an overall bear market for crypto, where a lot of people came in at the end of 2017 and perhaps have lost confidence in the overall market. So having these metrics display, and the amount of people that are reaching out even to EOS Nation, I'm sure people are reaching out to you. I've got an idea, I've got a dApp, I'm working on this project. How do I set it up on EOS? I want to choose EOS. Why should I choose EOS? Or I've already chosen EOS. What should I do next? And then that's where then you get the more technical questions. What will I need? How does CPU utilization work? How about net utilization? How about creating smart contracts? How much RAM will I need for that? The amount of questions that we get is impressive to say the least. So my overview and my thought on all of this is that I'm very, very positive. I'm very bullish long-term for sure on the health of the ecosystem. We've only started to scratch the surface on what is currently available. And more, we're seeing a lot of applications being developed. In the short term, it seems like a lot of them are games. I think that the gamification and the gaming aspect on EOS right now is already taking form, and we're already seeing a lot of that. So we're seeing some games, we're seeing some gambling. So we're seeing some very low transactions per second, but multiple. So if you look at EOS bets, that type of thing where it's very easy, it's very simple, but people are excited. People want to use the blockchain. And for the first time ever, people are able to use the blockchain to do some cool stuff. So I think this is just scratching the surface of where we're going to be even by December, and then let alone by next summer. I think that we're going to see some massive improvements in optimization, because we're still having some issues in the sense that we're getting CPU utilization right now because it's single-threaded. We're seeing the limits of single-threaded. So we're going to see, hopefully, in the short, medium term, multi-threading coming about, resolving those issues. Then you're going to be able to see that transactions per second go up. You're going to be able to have more of these small applications run on. More and more people get that transactional confidence that they're able to use the blockchain and it works. And you can use it and you don't even know you're running on a blockchain. And I think at some point that's going to give that trust that the small businesses are looking for. So with that transactional confidence, that transactional certainty, you're going to have more and more small businesses come on. As these small businesses come on, they're going to bring a massive amount of users. And I'm still very bullish that at some point, you're going to have a tipping point where all of this is just going to boom like we have never seen in blockchain before, because there's no other blockchain right now that is capable of doing what EOS is capable of doing. We are at that point. But again, I'm incredibly impatient. So as much as I'm sure you are as well, as much as I would like this to all happen next week, realistically, we know that this takes time. I mean, it took 9 years from the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper that was released in 2009 to get to where we are today. And if we look at the leaps and bounds that we've done since, for example, Ethereum got released in 2015, and that we started seeing what was capable with smart contracts to where we are now, we're seeing that time space distance shorten. And I think that at some point we're going to get to a time frame where people are just deploying one after another, and we won't be able to keep up.
No, I agree with you. I think it's more about the impatience, because there's a lot of concern about, Block.1 having announced this so many VC funds and so on. And we don't hear any follow-up. I think there have been just Wikipedia, which happened before mainnet launch. Yeah. And now everybody's waiting. And that creates a lot of impatience from people that we need to see. And I hope that is London Hackathon and then Blockchain Live. I think Dan Larimer and Brendan Bloomer both are attending. So we were just discussing on some other shows that there are big expectations, and it's time that we see those things and see that money at work.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be there, and my fingers are crossed, and my expectations are high. Are you going to be attending?
Not at all. I think this time I'm getting too many things right now. I'm maybe targeting for San Francisco Hackathon.
Nice.
That's easier for me. But I think London, I'm going to skip, because what happened here is, as I said, right, means I have started a lot of new projects. So I'm not going to talk about them, not trying to digress here. But I think getting back to the London Hackathon itself. So where do you see right now, what are other than the wallet, which I think everybody's waiting for?
Yes.
What else do you see? Like the free accounts? Yes, I think everybody needs it, even though personally I don't think that's a big issue.
Well, it was an issue when they announced that they were going to do that months ago, when the price of RAM was effectively going out of control. And now you can see that the price of RAM has really stabilized. RAM is no longer an issue.
Yes.
It's very rare that you see that you even hear in discussions RAM being an issue at this point. Lately, the issue has clearly been CPU utilization. So I foresee the wallet. I would think that this is maybe not a no-brainer, but I think you're going to get the wallet. I think that in the wallet you're going to have the free accounts. I don't see why not. I think that there's perhaps going to be a component of KYC in there, in the sense that if you get your wallet from the iStore, perhaps it gives that 1-for-1, and maybe we're going to get something more on the lines of UBI, URI. That's been, is it URI? Yeah, URI, that's been discussed lately. Universal resource inheritance, or I guess the Dan Larimer version of universal basic income, but specifically for EOS token holders and that inflation. So when we might get some announcements out of that, I think that we might get a couple of announcements in terms of dApps. I would think that perhaps Block One has been working on maybe something that's useful for the ecosystem that we simply have not really heard of. And I think we're going to have one announcement that comes completely left wing that nobody's talking about right now. And it's just, oh, wow, this is great. Cool. We now have this feature, or we now have this. And then I think what I'm hoping to see, and what I think we're going to see, is the roadmap. I'm hoping, and you touched upon it when you talked about the different VC funds that Block One has accumulated over the last, I guess less year or so. I think that I'm hoping that we're going to see a clear roadmap on who's going to be doing what, and more tangibly what's going to come out of those VC funds.
No, makes sense. So I think I agree with you. I think everybody is definitely expecting wallet. So based on the rumors, I think Dan Larimer has given 2 hints. One is of course, the Steemit, next version of Steemit, that is social media. Another is the decentralized exchange. I think he has very specifically talked about Block.one is going to do an exchange. Now, but I think coming to the point of UBI or URI, what do you think about that? Because I think this is again a debate. My personal view is that anyway, even if they make some changes to the software, it should be visible to anybody on GitHub. Nobody has seen that at that level where you can see the changes happening. And moreover, it's a community project. You cannot really, Block.one cannot integrate the system contract level features without getting approval from community and block producer voting. So I think it's too early, but maybe you guys are seeing those already, or what do you think? Like, there's a lot of debate on UBI. What do you think about the whole idea?
See, and I've been asked this before, and it's tricky because and I spent last night, I think it was 2 a.m. or so, and I was messaging Dan, and he was answering it in the channel. And what I want to know is we need to define our terms. So it started off as universal basic income, and now it's universal resource inheritance. The idea is premised upon the worker proposal savings fund going down to 0 effectively, and just that 4% being used for this. And then it's predicated upon the fact that you already have an EOS account, so that you would be getting kind of this, each user would be getting their share of this inflation. But would it be a 1-for-1? Would it be on the number of tokens you hold? Would it be a percentage? So we have very, very little information. And that's why I find it's difficult for me to have an informed opinion on whether or not that's good. Regardless of all of this, so my personal philosophy is, I think that universal basic income, if done properly, I think is something that we will see in our lifetime. And I am a proponent of that. I think that more and more, regardless of the blockchain, more and more, as we see a lot of the common or current jobs being phased out and replaced with automation, I think at some point it's just inevitable that there's going to be less work for people, but we still have a growing population. And if there's a way that it doesn't take from anybody else, but that everybody can have a very basic, standard of living, why not? However, when I talked to Dan about that last night, that is not the intent of what he's thinking of with URI. What he's thinking of, and what his reply was, I said, so who is the target recipient of URI? And his answer was humanity. So that's very vague, but at the same time, when you start thinking about it, if his vision is indeed that at some point EOS will be used globally, and that every single human being on the planet would be transacting on the EOS network, if we use that as a premise, and that every single human being then gets, you know, their share of that 4%, it does indeed become at some point a universal resource inheritance. How that's being done, and how we would go about doing that, and would we set limitations, and how about KYC, that type of thing? It's very hard to say whether or not I support it until I have a better understanding of the details. But in principle, I think it's a really interesting concept that we should push, that we should invest in finding out more. Why not?
Yes.
I think that it is really interesting.
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. I think nobody has ever debated that it is a bad idea. What I always argue against is there are very good models being defined in various different economic conditions, where we say we are at point A and we want to go to point B. So defining point B is easier, but defining a transition path from A to B, that is, I think, the most challenging part, where you make it fair, make it like people find a way to manipulate the system, people find a way to benefit from it. Like, let's come back to our block producer situation. So while it's a great system, we have a voting, we have the top 21 being voted by token holders. I don't think, I've not met a single person who agrees that today the voting is absolutely fair, and the top 21 are the deserving block producer based on the value. Or
That's tricky.
These are the challenges, I think, where the implementation has to come into picture. And that's where if you may have seen my views on various referendums, various other things which are up for voting, I always question, first, let's fix the basic DPoS system, where we say that, yes, we have a working voting mechanism, and then we put more funds for voting, more decisions to be made either using a referendum or using any other tools. But I think we do need it. It's a democracy. We do need tools. I think it's a great work being done by a lot of you, I think, working on referendum systems, working on this worker proposal. I don't want to get into the politics of it, I think, because it's very difficult to capture that in a few minutes and cover all the points.
That could be a full show, and it could be a series. It wouldn't just be one.
Yes. So, but I would say that without saying anything in favor or against, I would say that we need to take baby steps right now. And what I think most of people who are doing means, the good thing about EOS community is that everybody is meaning well, even though people disagree.
Yeah,
they have a good intent at heart. We haven't really identified a clear bad element messing up with the system.
No.
The only thing is miscommunication, and I think EOS Nation, EOS Alliance, a lot of people are, I think, doing this, and I think you are one of the leading block producer who is trying to reach out as you highlighted. So I think we are getting a little too long on this show. So let's conclude with your remarks. Like, where do you see EOS heading in next 1 or 2 years, or in immediate future? What should the people look forward to?
So immediate future, in terms of what should we look forward to, we've got the referendum coming up, and the referendum is incredibly important. So like you mentioned, we're not in a democracy, right? We're in a plutocracy right now, where some people have more voices than others, and that those voices are correlated on the number of EOS tokens that you hold. But what we don't have right now is a method for individual token holders to have a voice in the strategic direction of where they want their chain to go. So this was a feature that was discussed in the white paper, and unfortunately, when the EOS.io software launched and was released to the public, and the community launched the chain, we did not have this means to give the community a voice. And with the referendum, we will now have a tool to be able to give the community a voice. As you said, though, this voice might be distorted because of the current system that we have in place. That's a different topic, but at least we'll now have this tool. Once we have this tool, I think that we're going to be able to bring questions to the general public and see what the community feedback is. So instead of having this discussion in the channel, and like I mentioned before, you've got a channel with 3,000 people, but only 50 of them are talking. And really, there's only 5 of them that are really, really talking. Yes. We will be able to give a voice to those 3,000 people if they so choose to use that voice, but at least that mechanism will be out. So short term, I think this is the largest and most important improvement to the ecosystem. In terms of long term, what I'm continually fighting for is to create that global community. We saw in other blockchain projects, and I've been in the blockchain space since 2010, we saw in the other blockchain projects, the communities over time distancing themselves and really splitting up. And we saw this especially in the proof of work protocol type blockchains, where the community at first was a tight-knit community and it eventually left. And what I'm fighting for every day, and where I think there's more value in EOS than in other blockchains, is the community. The community right now, in my opinion, is if not the single largest strength of the network, it's definitely in the top. And what I'm trying to do as much as possible is keep the global community as tight-knit as possible. So that means that I've spent 52 days in the last 3 months in China and in South Korea. And it means that most likely I'll be spending more time there. And it means that we're going to keep growing our ambassador program so that we get the voices of the community throughout the world. So that we get different cultural inputs, different language inputs, different viewpoints from the bank versus the unbanked, people who have large amount of tokens and those who don't have that many. People where, for example, RAM costs was a significant issue for account creation for them, and other people didn't really matter and they had other issues. So we as a community, I think the idea is to keep on thriving, keep on working towards achieving that global community. And in 2 or 3 years, if EOS can still be where we are in terms of community sentiment. So yes, we might not always agree, but we all agree that we want to make EOS better. If we can keep this as strong and as healthy as possible, I think the potential of EOS is almost unlimited. This is going to bring us new levels of blockchain adoption that we have not seen before, that we can't even imagine.
No, thanks a lot. I think that is a very good view. I think we should look at EOS as a community. Ultimately, blockchain was designed to disrupt the way we operate, to bring democratization to everything. And EOS has that promise. I think we are seeing that evolve. Right now, it's only in the gambling space, but hopefully it will be in more meaningful ways. It can bring the change. And I cannot disagree the way EOS Nation is progressing in terms of spending time bridging these gaps. I think we really appreciate you for that. And thanks for coming on the show, Yves. I think it was really great talking to you, and hopefully we will keep interacting, as you are also a big community voice now in EOS while being a block producer. So look forward to interact with you a lot, and keep up the good work.
Certainly, and likewise, keep up the good work. You're key in this ecosystem. So thank you very much for having me on, and we look forward to serving the community. EOS Nation, one block at a time, building our future.
Thank you. Bye-bye.